Hey, hey, hey. All right, let's go ahead and pull out Evolution of Populations, Part 1. Okay, so in this one, the first part talks about, first let's say what is a population. A population is, and you want to write this at the top, a population is a group of organisms that can make a fertile offspring. And you know that from ecology. A group of organisms that can make fertile offsprings. And so when I say fertile offsprings, what does that mean? When I say fertile offsprings, that is, if you're fertile, that means you can have children. So they can make a baby that can make a baby, right? And so if you can make a baby that can make a baby, then you're the same species, or you're in one population. So a group of organisms that can make babies that can make babies, right? And so Darwin in his book, in Natural Selection and Evolution, but Darwin in his book said that populations evolve, not individuals. And this is because we are what we are because of the genetics we inherited. So you are who you are because you got your parents' DNA. You can't change your DNA. And so in order for evolution to occur, it's got to be in your DNA. If a mutation occurs in the DNA that's in your sex cells, sperm or egg, then your offspring can be mutated. But if it happens in your somatic cell, that's you. That's your skin cancer. So even though those changes can affect the generations, and therefore a change of traits has occurred, so it says, in other words, the population is evolving from generation to generation. So it takes children and then children and then children for there to be offspring, right? And so individuals suffer or benefit as a result of these traits. And so there's weak traits and strong traits. And that's what Darwin told us. And so looking at these birds, they're called blue-footed boobies. I know, right? They have blue feet. And the male will have to dance for the female, and the female will choose to reproduce with the male or not reproduce. And so having a good dance would be a good trait. And so over the next 100 years, the dances are getting more active and better. And so nature selects for those weak traits. But the next thing says population genetics is the study that studies the trait variation rates over time within a population. And we already defined population. They can interbreed. And so that's what the next thing says. Okay, so the next thing says they're the same species at the same place at the same time, and they can reproduce. So again, right out beside D, fertile offspring, like these blue-footed boobies. And so species, most defined as organisms that are so similar, their DNA is similar, right? Genetically similar, that they can produce living fertile offspring. Genetics are very similar, and so like when a man and woman have a baby, the sperm and egg have to be able to identify each other, and then those chromosomes have to pair up like in meiosis. And so in order to reproduce with a species, the DNA has to be very similar. Genetics are very important in defining a species. And remember, your DNA, that's how you make proteins, right? Okay, and then there's where it says you have to live close to each other. Sometimes organisms are separated, like these salamanders, and they're geographically separated, and so they don't reproduce together. And so this salamander and this salamander, they could never make a baby because they're so far apart, because this is like around a continent, or around a barrier. And so this is a different species than this one is, than this one is, than this one is. And this is called a ring species. So we're out beside Geographic Range, write for me ring species. A population is in one place at one time, so they can reproduce together. A squirrel here in Trustful and a squirrel in China, well, they can't reproduce together now, can they? And so there's, humans are different because we can actually get on a plane. If I wanted to make a baby with a man in China, I could. I'd have to get on a plane and do it. But squirrels aren't that way. Most animals aren't. You know, if you have a dog, it can't travel to China. Well, anyway, we'll leave it at that. Okay, so it says, for example, squirrels, couldn't travel. So gene pools may or may not interact. It depends on species and if the geographic barrier. So like squirrels here and squirrels here, they may have similar DNA, but they probably couldn't reproduce together because their DNA is so different because they've lived apart for so long. Okay, and then let's talk about allele frequency. First, remember this. Remember that this is a gene. And so write that on your paper. Big A, little a, the whole thing is a gene. Well, just one letter is an allele. Right? So just the big A is an allele. Just the little a is an allele. But together, it's a gene. Right? So you have 2 alleles for every gene. Write that down. You have 2 alleles. Every gene. Okay, so let's think about it. Let's pretend like in trustful, we'll go with a blank page here. In trustful, 50% of people, or 50%, have a capital A, a dominant letter. And then 50% have a lowercase letter. Right? So that doesn't mean that everybody's heterozygous. That, some people are this, and some people are this, and some people are this. But we'll just say that's the percent of the alleles. Well, after 10 years, if that's changed, and now it's 40% and 60%, well, that means that the allele frequency changed. And that's what evolution is. Evolution is a change in genes, a change in DNA. So allele is a version of a gene. The frequency is just the number. That's how many. It's like the decimal number. It is considered to be fixed if there is no change. So if it's 0.5 and it remains 0.5 forever, then there was no evolution. It's considered evolving if the frequency changes. So if the numbers change after 10 years, then there was evolution. And the truth is, most populations are evolving all the time. The percent of red hair may go from 10% to 8% to 2%. That's evolution. So most populations are changing. All right, I hope that was helpful.